Friendship shouldn't be a complicated concept for us to understand, but how do we know if we're truly in the company of friends and not someone who we thought was our friend? Coming from experience, I've always had a habit of handing out the friend label to almost everyone that I meet, which, in retrospect, isn't the smartest thing to do. So it's no surprise that I would always find myself scratching my head whenever these friends would stab me in the back. But truthfully, friendship is a two-way street. So while it might be my first instinct to criticize someone else for being a bad friend, I think it's equally as important to hold myself to the same standard. But hold on a second. What is the standard? How do we know if someone is really our friend? How do we know the difference between a friend and an acquaintance? And what are the ideal qualities needed in order to maintain a healthy friendship? Like anything else, we need to have a standard beyond our own personal expectations in order for us to properly evaluate the quality of our friendships. Why, you may ask? Well, because humans generally suck and aren't very consistent in our reasoning. So for this video, I'm going to share some tips that I use to not only choose my friends, but to also help me become a better friend to other people. And as you're watching, I'll also tell you where I picked up on this advice since, as I said, human beings generally suck at setting good standards for themselves. Alright, here's the first one. A good friend is someone who challenges you. If we look up the definition of friend, it states that a friend is someone who is on the same side with mutual trust and support. This definition is an oxymoron, and I'll explain why. Yes, we should absolutely be able to trust our friends, but we also shouldn't expect them to support every stupid idea or decision we make. As friends, we should be willing to challenge one another and have our disagreements. 90% of the people whom I thought were my friends stopped speaking to me for having seemingly controversial opinions instead of holding ideas which were deemed more acceptable by cultural standards. But in retrospect, these people weren't really interested in having a friendship. What they wanted was another version of themselves, someone who behaved in the same way and believed the same things. This is similar to what social justice would refer to as allyship. Give blind, superficial support to a group of people until, of course, someone in that group has a difference in opinion, thus not really being an ally to the individual, but more so to what that person represents. A checkbox. Here's the next one. A good friend should also be a good influence. Have you ever had a friend give you advice that they themselves aren't following? Sure, that advice they give could be valid, but a friend would want to see you succeed. If we look at this from the perspective of raising a child, a good parent should be responsible with how they live their own life so they can be a good role model to their child. And from the perspective of an adult, let's imagine for a second that you have a friend who's an alcoholic. Do you think it would be easy for them to reach sobriety while you continue drinking in their presence? Now, I suspect that some of my viewers might say that they're not personally responsible for what their friends do, and you're completely right. But in this scenario, if you truly care about your friend, you would aid them in their journey by not drinking around them. Lead by example. And again, this doesn't mean that you're obligated to fix all of your friend's problems, but if you care about your friend, you'll at least want to help them. A good friend listens. Sometimes it's not even about having a two-way conversation. It could just be that your friend needs to feel like you actually give a crap about what's going on in their life. But aside from that, listening is such a critical part of resolving conflict. People who yell or interrupt each other aren't interested in listening to what the other person has to say. All they care about is getting their own point across because it makes them feel better, or they're too prideful to admit that perhaps they're equally as responsible for whatever the conflict is. A good friend shouldn't gossip. I get it. This is a tough one. One of my biggest gripes is hearing about a problem that a friend has with me, but through an entirely different person. But why? Even as an adult, I feel like high school never really ended, but I hate the fact that we live in an age where people are so afraid of direct confrontation that they end up sharing details about your friendship to other people that aren't even involved. Don't get me wrong, I understand that sometimes you might genuinely need advice on how to approach someone, but I think there's a fine line between doing that and just flat out gossiping about them. A good friend will tough it out. From my experience, I find that these days people are so eager to end a friendship the moment it experiences even the slightest bit of turbulence.
Keep your eyes on the far end of the runway.
I'm not suggesting that you're obligated to stay friends with someone if you don't want to, because some friendships are beyond saving, and I get it. But as a friend, you both should be willing to at least attempt to weather the storm together. What's that phrase? When the going gets tough, the tough get going? The next time you find yourself going through a hard time, notice which of your friends decide to lend you a hand or check in on you to make sure you're okay, versus the friends who run for the hills right after emailing you an angry 5-page dissertation about how much you've changed. And like I said, some friendships are unsalvageable. And in those situations, I think it's important to learn how to forgive and not let bitterness and resentment fester inside, even if you don't end up reconciling. A good friend won't take advantage of you. While friends should be able to count on each other for help, it's important to recognize when your kindness is being exploited. Let me give you an example. I used to be friends with someone who fell on hard times and as a result, didn't have a place to live. Without even asking me, I offered her my living room couch until she was able to find a job and save up enough money to get into her own apartment. I was thinking this was gonna take maybe 2 months tops. Well, shortly after she moved in, I found out that she was receiving government assistance, and I'm thinking to myself, okay, well, great. I didn't ask any questions. I was just happy that she was saving up some type of income, or so I thought. The week after I found out about this, she walks in the door with a brand new iPod, designer sneakers, and something from Build-A-Bear. This woman got too comfortable, so I asked her to leave. But if I'm being honest with you, I've also been guilty of doing the same thing. Not in the sense of being a freeloader, but there was a time where I'd only call up my friends and my family members when I needed something, and not because I wanted to catch up and see how they were doing. This isn't to say that we shouldn't feel comfortable asking our friends for help, but we should also be mindful about what we're asking of them and how often we're doing it. A good friend is honest. Establishing healthy boundaries is an important part of maintaining a good friendship, but how does one expect to do that when they won't be honest? This isn't to say that you should just use your friend as a verbal punching bag because you're just being honest. More on that in a second. But if given the opportunity, it's best to always tell the truth. This should be a principle that people live by all the time with every interaction they have, and it's not difficult to understand why. I mean, just look around. Our culture is obsessed with lying because our culture is obsessed with feelings. Either people are too afraid of making someone feel bad, or they would rather hear lies out of pride for their own feelings. So, in terms of friendship, if you can't be honest with someone, which is such a basic principle that costs you nothing, then how can you be trusted with matters that are more serious? A good friend is helpful. Friends should be willing to tell each other the things they need to hear as opposed to the things that they want to hear. Growth doesn't come from always being comfortable or hearing things that make us feel good. So if, for example, my friend wanted to pursue a career in singing but sounded like this,
"Don't you wish your girlfriend was hot like me? Don't you wish your girlfriend was a freak like me? Don't you?"
No.
I would tell her, hey, listen, I think it's great that you want to pursue singing, but maybe you should start off slow and maybe get a vocal coach or something. Now, again, I have to emphasize the word helpful, because oftentimes when people hear this, they end up being intentionally hurtful and saying something like, you suck. Now, although that might be true, is it actually helping the other person? I also think it's helpful for friends to be optimistic, which is encouraging, as opposed to being pessimistic, which leads to a defeatist attitude. Overall, a friend will want to aid you in your development and not in your downfall. Okay. So now we're down to the last part of this video, and this piece of advice isn't necessarily a friendship trait, but it's more so a reminder, just something you should keep in the back of your mind as you're out there trying to mingle, make new friends, or perhaps reassess the friendships you currently have. Bad company ruins good morals. Most people tend to base their morality on culture or how they were raised. The problem with that, however, is human behavior is inconsistent and unpredictable. So in these situations, you don't have a way of justifying that your definition of morality is actually good. Now, this is very serious because if we're saying that bad company ruins good morals, then how does one know if they're in the presence of bad company when they're relying on people or themselves to define standards of morality? Some could say that killing is wrong and you don't need God or the Bible to prove that, which is true. There is a natural law that all of us are programmed to follow, but as I said at the beginning of this video, human beings generally suck at consistency and oftentimes will suppress the good because it doesn't align with culture. Let me give you some examples. Murder is bad, except in the case of abortion. Gang violence is bad, unless you can monetize it. Stealing is bad, unless you can justify it because you're broke. And racism is bad, unless it's towards white people. If you find yourself distorting morality around your friends, then it might be time to find better friends. But then again, I think a good place to start would be questioning where your morals come from in the first place. But that's gonna be it for this video, so I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you did, go ahead and give it a thumbs up and hit that subscribe button. And if there's another topic you'd like me to provide commentary on, let me know in the comments below. Also, don't forget to check out my new designs over at No System. I'll put the link in the description. And also, if you want to support my channel, you can do so by joining me on Locals, gothix.locals.com. My name is Gothix, and I'll see you next time. Bye! Thanks for watching. If you want to keep my grift going, consider picking up some official merch by visiting nosysnos.com/Gothix or joining my Locals community at gothix.locals.com for more content. As always, you can help amplify my message by giving this video a thumbs up and by sharing it online with your friends. Until next time.